I'd like to welcome you all back to the ID427 garage. Today we're back working on the 25th anniversary car. While Michael's car is away at paint, we're going to see if we can't get some stuff done on this one. We are going to start referring to this car by a nickname that I got from the car owner. There's a really great story that goes along with this nickname. I'll share that with you probably later. But we're going to be calling this car Pauline. So what we're going to be doing today, and what I've done so far, is I've actually been working on some of the footbox stuff. The last couple of days I haven't filmed a whole lot. I think you guys can probably hear my voice. I've been sick the last couple of days. So what I did was I've mounted some of the Coyote ECU required parts onto the footbox assembly. We're using the hydraulic clutch for the wheelwood pedal box assembly, and so we did have to modify the bracket here to hit the plunger in the right spot, and we do still have some adjustment for this. You can see the gap. There's a good finger's width of gap in there, but I want to make sure that we get the clutch slave cylinder installed and bled to figure out exactly where this switch needs to be. Basically, the ECU on the Coyote Ford control pack needs to see this signal to know that the clutch is disengaged in order to start the engine. Now, I'm sure there is a way to use the switch that Factory 5 provides for the wheelwood pedal box assembly, and I don't know if I pointed this out. I know I pointed out the parts, but I didn't show them installed. We actually replaced the Factory 5 supplied switches with the AEC Delco brand or the GM equipment, original equipment brand switches because of the reliability factor. Now, since we'll be using the Ford control pack switch, I'm probably going to pull this switch out because it's not going to be needed. And we'll put this back in the box that the switch was shipped in, and we'll save that for the car owner. And if he ever has a problem with the brake light switch, which is on the brake pedal, he'll have a spare switch to go ahead and swap it out with. So we've got that mounted. We've got adjustment on it. We'll probably revisit this when we get the clutch system a little bit farther along. What I have been working on is aluminum panels. I still haven't finished up this outer aluminum panel for the driver's foot box, but I'll get around to that. We're going to start working on some fuel lines, and I mistakenly called the parts that we were missing in the last video tube nuts, and we're not missing the tube nuts. The tube nuts are actually here. Let me see if I can find some. These are the tube nuts. Okay, so these go on the tube, and then a tube sleeve goes on, and then the stainless steel gets flared at a 45-degree angle, and it's the tube sleeve that acts as a lock for the tube nut to ride up against and seal against. And so it's the sleeves that we are short, and Summit Racing has been great. Even though they were out of the Russell brand, they had their own brand, which I believe Russell probably makes, because they're a couple of cents difference in price, and they look identical. So regardless, those should be here tomorrow. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to take a tape measure, and I'm going to put my tape measure here against this back frame member. I'm going to take a clamp, and I'm going to clamp my tape measure to there, and I'm going to route my tape measure down to the 4-inch tube, and then I'm going to run it under the foot box, and then I'm going to bring it up over to this corner of the foot box here, and I'm going to bring it just above the top of the foot box to get my lengths, and then I'm going to cut 2 pieces of the stainless tubing, and I'm going to run those through the tubing straightener. Alright, so here you can see I've got the tape measure clamped to about where I want the tubes to end. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pull this just a little bit down, and I'm going to hook it around the back of the 4-inch tube like that. It's not going to want to stay though. Of course it's not going to want to stay right now. And then I've got this end coming up right against the 4-inch tube. And so what I've got here is I've got, about 76 inches. So what I'll probably do is I'll cut these at 80. And then at 80, I'll have a couple of inches excess on either side. And generally I work them from the back to the front. So I'm going to figure out where my the rear 90s on each of the two tubes need to be, both supply and return. And then I'll get those started towards the front, and that'll determine where my front 90 up to the inside of the foot box is going to be. And then any excess that I have will be at the front, and I can either leave it or I can cut it off. Alright, I had some questions the last time I did the tube straightening because I didn't show it. How to get started. So basically what I do is I take the end of the 3/8 tube and I just smash it and tighten it down in the end of the vise. And then I just basically start walking the coil back and unrolling it as I go. And you can see this is a 20-foot long piece. It's not straight, right? It's still curved, but it's at least to the point where I can start putting it in the tubing straightener. So now I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the end over here. I'm going to put my tape measure on the end. I'm going to run it down the piece until I get to 80 inches, and I'm going to take the marker and I'm going to mark it, and then I'm going to cut it. And then from that mark where I cut it off, I'm going to measure another 80 inches down the tube, and I'm going to cut it on that spot. And then I should have I'm just over just under 7 feet for each piece. So I'm going to end up with about a 7-foot piece extra. But I don't think you can get a 14-foot piece ordered. So it's either a 5, 10, or 20-foot piece of the 3/8 tubing when you order it. And it comes in steel, it comes in stainless steel like we're using, and it comes in aluminum. I don't suggest the aluminum for fuel lines. I just think it's too soft. But the steel or the stainless steel work great. And so we're going to go ahead, we're going to measure this out, we're going to cut it into 2 pieces, and then I will put the tubing straightener in the vise and I'll show you how that works. Alright, this is the tubing straightener. So basically you take the uncoiled piece of tubing, which we've got right here, and it's just a matter of starting to push the tubing back and forth. You're going to turn it a little so it goes in at a little bit different angle each time you're putting it through the dies. And then over a course of probably 5-10 minutes, you'll get the tube to the point where it's pretty straight. I mean, you can see we've just run it through there a couple of times and it's already straightened out. And then I can adjust the tension up here on the top. The more tension I put on, the tighter the roller dies become, and the straighter it will be. The problem is if you over tighten, what you start doing is you'll start to anneal the surface of the metal and soften it, and you don't want to do that. So you just want to have enough tension on there to get the tubing straight. So once it's straight, or as straight as you think you need it, just stop. And then like I said, I think I made these at 80 inches, so I've got 2 of them in 80, and then I've got the scrap piece over there on the far side of the shop. And if we don't use that on this project, then we'll put it off to the side and see if we can use it on another project. You can see you're not going to make them perfectly straight, but you're going to get them pretty darn close. And then by the time you get this strapped up, like you can see, there's the one on the left there is a little bit more bowed than the one on the right. And it's just the way it is. But by the time you get them strapped to the side of the chassis, and you got some fasteners and some clips on them, they're going to be nice and straight. So don't get too caught up in, you know, making the tubes perfectly straight, because, you know, every time you send them through the straightener, you're changing, you know, the direction of the tubing. So if it goes in, you know, with a crown this way, the dies are going to make it want to go the other way. And so it's all about finding a happy medium as you're getting the tubing straight. Now, I know a lot of guys aren't going to have a tubing straightener. They're honestly not all that expensive. I mean, you can pick one up for, you know, 150, maybe 200 bucks. And if you're only going to do this once, it doesn't make any sense to do that. But you can also buy, if you go to like a local hose and tube place that makes hydraulic hoses, a lot of times they'll stock this 3/8 stainless tubing in straight lengths. Usually it's 20 to 21 feet. Now if that's too long and it won't fit in your vehicle, you know, maybe you've got an SUV and you've only got 8 feet of length, then, you know, they'll cut it for you. Or you can bring a hacksaw with you and cut it with a hacksaw or a tubing cutter. So that's one way to get around the tubing straightener. I've just found that it's easier to order this stuff from the online automotive parts warehouses in the coiled packs, and it's a little bit cheaper, and it's much easier to package, and so you're not going to pay huge amounts in order to ship, you know, a long length of straight tubing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go in for supper tonight, and I'll be back out here in the shop tomorrow. All right, everybody, next day I am working on fuel lines today, and I've already jumped ahead a little bit. You saw me straighten the pipe or the tubing yesterday, and today what I'm doing is I'm pre-fitting the lines on the side of the chassis. So let me grab a flashlight here, and you can see I always start at the back. So I've got the two lines coming down the back portion of the frame. They're going to tuck in nicely there against the back of the upper support, this support right here, and they'll be strapped on there as well. And there has to be a little bit of an offset in this lower tube to get it around that other piece, because you want both of those pieces to sit flat on the back. Let me see, where's my hand at? On the back of the upper support. So we've got it run down the entire length of the frame all the way up to the front. And then what I've done here is I've made two marks. I've made one mark here, and I've made one mark here. And that's where the tubes are going to 90 up onto the side of the passenger footbox. And I'm going to extend them probably just over the top of the footbox here. And that's where we'll be making a transition to the soft lines. Basically, we're going to transition there from the stainless steel hard tubing into stainless steel braided lines, and then that will take us into our pressure regulator, fuel pressure regulator, and then from the fuel pressure regulator into the fuel rail. So if you look at these clips, because I wanted to point this out, if you look at these clips, what I do is I actually take a 3/4 inch cushion clip and a couple of pieces of fuel line, the stainless steel hard fuel line. I put those inside of the cushion clip. I then bolt the cushion clip together with a 1/4 nut, and then I put them in the vise, and I clamp this bolt basically in between the two fuel lines. And as it clamps down, it makes two independent slots in the cushion clip for the fuel lines. And then right now I've just got them temporarily mounted with some Clecos. So I only drilled 1/8 inch holes in the 4-inch tube for now. When those get mounted permanently, they'll get drilled out to 3/16, and we'll put 3/16 inch pop rivets in there. But for now, this enables me to take the line on and off the car to fit and measure and bend and all that other stuff to make the lines in, go in where I want them. Now, each of these lines is going to have to be cut, and then they're going to have to be flared on either end so that I can adapt them to the AN. And so when I get to that point, I'll kind of walk you guys through how that process goes. I mean, ideally, it's best to have a 37, I think it's 37 or 37.5 degree flaring tool. But with the stainless, because of how hard it is in comparison to standard steel fuel line and even aluminum, it'll actually, the front corner, the front edge of that stainless will bite into the end of the AN adapter, and it's not really an adapter. What we're using is we're going to be using AN6 male couplings. And on one side, that male coupling will allow us to go into the soft line, the stainless braided line. But on the stainless hardline side of it, what we do is we slide on a tube nut and then a tube sleeve, and the inside of the sleeve has that same 37.5 or 37 degree angle, and the end of that male coupling is 37 degrees. And so as you put the tube nut and the tube sleeve on, then you flare the line, and then you bring everything up. And then, of course, I always use a little bit of lubricant, so I use motor oil, and tighten it up, and it'll be leak-free. So I'm done out here tonight, so I will catch up with you guys tomorrow night. All right, everybody. Fresh new day, fresh new haircut. I've been working a little bit on the 25th anniversary car, getting fuel lines taken care of since I got home from work this afternoon. So I've got the front 90s up where they need to be. Now I still need to take the upper line and just put a little kick in it to bring it out like I did on the bottom one, and I'm actually probably going to take a little bit of the kick out on this lower one because it's really tight to the foot box, so I'm going to straighten that out just a little bit. And then on the other side, you can see where I've got the lines coming up. So they basically come up right here. I'm going to space them evenly like this. Oh, sorry about the light right in the camera. So I'm going to space them like this, and then probably about an inch up from the top of the foot box, right about here, I'm going to cut these off, and that's where we're going to make the transition to our soft lines. So the only thing I have left, as you can see, there's a little bit of a gap here I can fit my finger behind on this inner tube. I'm going to put a kick on that. I'm going to straighten out the other one just a little bit, and then these will be pretty much done. So what I'll end up doing is cutting and flaring the ends, and then putting the male tube couplings, the tube nuts and the tube sleeves on each side of these. In the back, what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to raise the car up a little bit. I don't know if you can see the lines in there. Yeah, you can. So I want those to end right about at this point, because that'll make it nice to transition just above the control arm and up into the fuel filter, which is going to mount right about here on the inside portion of the frame. And then the one line will just go directly to the return of the fuel pump, which is right here. And then the supply line will then feed the fuel filter, and from the fuel filter down to the feed. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the feed line the upper, and I'm going to have the return be the lower. That's generally the way I do it, because at the other end, the innermost tube closest to the firewall is going to be the easiest to get in straight into the fuel pressure regulator, and the bottom is where the fuel line return goes. And so it'll make a nice even curve down and under because it's just got a little bit more hose to it. So that's what I'm working on tonight. I'm going to continue working on this tomorrow. Tomorrow's Saturday, so I'll probably give it a little bit harder than I've given it the last couple of days. And I'll check back with you guys then. All right, it's too bad I had to turn off the music because you guys would have really enjoyed that song. I've got the 2 lines now cut off even at the top, even though they kind of don't look that way. The way the straps are holding them on and the fact that I don't have a strap at the top right now makes them look like they're uneven, but they're actually perfect. So if I hold them where they're supposed to go, you can see they're nice and even on the top. So I've got them strapped on the side of the chassis, but just enough. Right now I don't have all of the straps in there, so I've got one here and I've got one back here, but you can see because the lines aren't perfectly straight, I don't know, can you see that or not? Since the lines aren't perfectly straight, meaning the tubing straightener doesn't make them perfect, we'll actually hold them in place with the straps. So right now they're kind of lined up together, but they're actually going to sit more like this and look nice and neat when they're done. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here in the back and I'm going to measure where I want the top of these cut off, and then the lines will come off for probably the last time, and then I'll go ahead and clean up the ends, put the tube nuts and the tube sleeves on, flare the ends, and then put the couplings on the end so that these lines are ready to go. One thing that you want to remember, and I may talk about this again before the end of this video anyways, is after you get your hard lines done, make sure you take some time and blow some air, some compressed air, or even, you know, if nothing else, if you've got nothing else, take a garden hose and shoot some water through there, and then just make sure you get all the water out and make sure that you let them the lines sit so that any water that's left in there can drain out before you put the lines together. Water would be my last alternative if you don't have compressed air. But I'm a little bit leery about, you know, spraying brake parts cleaner in there and stuff like that, because while it may dislodge, you know, some debris that may be in the line, chances are it's not going to push it out through the end. And the only thing that we're really looking for as far as debris in there right now, the only debris that we're looking for is the metal shavings that may have come off the end of the line when we cut it on the bandsaw. I'm not using a tubing cutter on the ends because it honestly makes the line harder to flare, because the tubing cutter, as it's cutting, actually compresses the line down and makes the line smaller in the end, and then you have to go ahead and you have to open it up. Cutting them off with the bandsaw makes it nicer because you get a nice clean cut on the end, and then I run a reamer in the end of it to clean out the inside. Again, that may produce some metal shavings, and then I file the ends of them before I go ahead and flare the ends. So with that, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get these ready. I'm going to cut off the back portion where I want them, and then I'm going to get them ready to flare. Well, I just went through and counted all my fittings, and somehow I'm short one of these male unions. So I'm going to leave that off in the front because it's a lot easier to get to. But since I have all the tube nuts and everything else, I actually have one of these in stainless. So I'm just going to temporarily thread it on, but I'm not going to tighten it in the front, just so that I can get the fittings together. And I'll just add one of these to our next order from the parts house. So the way these work is, this is a tube nut. All right, it's got threads on the inside that will mate it up with the AN6 union. I call these couplings, but they're actually specified as unions. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put this on the tube here. And then these are the tube sleeves. And the way the tube sleeves work is, on this end of them, they have a 37 or a 37.5 degree bevel, and they fit inside They fit inside one of the tube nuts, and you can see they protrude out the back of it. And so when this is tightened down and torqued, that is going to create our seal. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to put a tube sleeve onto the tube. And they can sometimes fit a little tight. So we're going to put that on, we're going to slide it down, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to flare the end of this, and then I'll bring you back and I'll show you what it looks like put together. So this is what it's going to look like when it's all done being flared. It's going to have, somewhat of a belled end on it, and then the sleeve is going to slide up. The tube nut's going to come up through there, and then the union is going to go inside the threads. Now you always want to make sure when you put these together that you lubricate both the threads and the end of the fitting, so that when this goes together, you can get enough torque or leverage to put this thing together and have it seal. If you don't lubricate it, what's going to happen is it's going to start binding on the threads, regardless of what material the fittings are made of. These are made of aluminum. On the last build, we used all stainless. So the stainless, you can actually get them tighter without lubing them, but it doesn't make sense not to. We just use motor oil. I've just got some probably 5W30 inside an old Lucas bottle, and I just put a couple of drops on the end of my finger. I run it on the threads, I run it on the end of the fitting, and then I run these things together. Now, you don't need to have AN wrenches in order to put AN fittings together. The aluminum AN wrenches just aid in not scratching the fittings, but you can put some cushion on the end of your wrenches. I tend to use just not channel locks. I tend to use crescent wrenches to put these together, but you can use standard wrenches. The advantage with the crescent wrench is that you can wrap the jaws in tape, like electrical tape, black tape, and then not scratch the fittings up. But if you're careful, you can just use standard wrenches and just don't go nuts. You're just trying to get these tight so they don't leak. You're not trying to tighten them until you fart. So with that little bit of advice, I am done here in the shop this evening. I'm going to go in and grab some dinner, and then I'll catch up with you guys tomorrow morning. All right, next morning, I am working on the fuel lines still, and I have gotten all of the ends flared. So I don't know if you guys can see that in there. I've got the end flared on both of those and the connectors on. And then I have everything strapped in place with Clecos for right now. So 4 Clecos and 4 straps across the bottom. And then on the engine side of the car, the blue fitting right there is just a placeholder. I screwed up. I only ordered 3 of the 6AN unions, and I should have ordered 4. So I ordered another one this morning when I first came out to the shop, so that should be here hopefully day after tomorrow. And then I've got to get the connectors, or not the connectors, the tubes strapped onto the footbox wall. But I think I'm going to wait on that until I figure out where the distribution box for the Ford control pack is going to go, because what I don't want to do is I don't want to put the fuel lines, fix them rigidly against the foot box and then find out, oh whoops, I gotta move them now. So I don't feel like pulling off the tire right now, because then I'd have to jack up the back of the car and get you in there. I'll do that probably when I strap those lines back there, but I think I'm going to end the video here. It's probably dragging on a little bit long. Just wanted to go over how we do the hard fuel lines from the back of the car to the front of the car. And that should give you a kind of a broad overview on how we do it. I will tell you that when I made my initial cuts in this particular brand of tubing, I used the tubing cutter, which I told you, makes the diameter of the end of it smaller. And for whatever reason, when I was doing the 37-degree flares, on both of those cuts that I'd used the tubing cutter, the end split. So I had to take both of those over to the bandsaw, cut them off flush or square, and then file the ends, remount the inside, and then reflare them. So I can't blame it on the tubing. I just think maybe because the tubing was compressed as we used the tubing cutter around the outside, and then now we're opening it up with the flaring tool. Maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. But once I cut them square with the bandsaw and then reflared them, they were fine. So all of the fittings are tight except for the one blue fitting up there that you saw that was just a placeholder. I just had an AN fitting here that was a number 6, and I just don't want the tube nut to keep falling down, and so what I do is I just screw that on there. It's just loose, but it'll at least hold everything in place for the time being until I get the other AN6 union. So with that, thank you guys all for watching. If you could, do the like, the share, the subscribe. We're coming up on a milestone for us as far as subscribers, and we appreciate every one of you. So thank you for that. We'll see you guys all next time. Have a great day.